Good afternoon, and a slightly worrying moment when everyone could have left and gone downstairs. So slightly relieved to be talking to anyone in the room, so that's obviously a very positive thing. And I'm very glad that I didn't try and incorporate any kind of technology into my presentation. So relief on a couple of points. And that slightly worrying bit when you're giving a presentation and you know that there are people in the room that are equally as skilled in the topic in which you are about to deliver, adds a little bit of extra pressure. So there are others in the room, if you are wanting to ask any questions or meet people afterwards, talk at the break, that are also very involved in this speciality. So yeah, I've been a part of teenage and young adult cancer care now for probably about 15 years, and I've spent most of that time at the Christie Hospital, either working in a very age-appropriate specialist unit, or working as the lead nurse for teenagers and young adults out across Merseyside originally for 3 years, and then I've been back at the Christie since about 2012 doing the same role. And how I cover that patch is I have a very good team of staff that I work alongside, and that's how we get across such a big area. So hopefully today I'm going to cover 4 different areas which will hopefully be of interest to those of you that have stayed for the presentation. So quite a look at what makes teenage and young adult patients, although the young adults is in the title, but a lot of our work is with that slightly younger, so teenagers as well. So what makes this age group a unique age group that even deserves a degree of presentation? We'll then have a look at what the impact of a brain tumour on that young adult, those teenagers, might be, what good care and support looks like for young adults, and then a bit of a nod to what some of the barriers to delivery of good care might be. And I guess there's a very wide range of people within the room, and I would welcome any questions at the end of the presentation. So in terms of what makes young adults unique, I think it's, well, I guess before we go in that bit, I think one of the things I absolutely wanted to get across, I'm a very passionate believer that, yes, this is a unique age group, but actually I think it's one of many unique age groups. Age-appropriate care, I think we give it a paediatric level in our healthcare. We're starting to deliver a lot more of it for our teenage and young adult patients. It's becoming much greater and much more widely recognised, certainly in cancer care. But actually, it's about recognising that there are an awful lot of other age-appropriate groups, and having age-appropriate environments for our 30 and 40-year-olds that are perhaps young parents, are developing family life, through to those in their sort of 50s and 60s. The issues that those 50 and 60-year-olds have got in their life stage are very different from those 30s and 40s, and so on through all of our lives. And actually, I think it's a much greater issue. Yes, I know there are massive financial issues, but I think there needs to be a much greater and much wider recognition of the fact that once you turn 25, we shouldn't just be treating all of our adult patients in exactly the same way. There needs to be different, perhaps different techniques, different areas available on wards. So I'm quite passionate about that. But obviously, I'm even more passionate about this specific age group. So I think this is quite a nice quote just to start things off. Young people, or youth, offers the promise of happiness, but life offers the realities of grief. So young people, they get to the age of maybe 16, 17, 18, they've perhaps just started to get a little bit of money in their pocket. Parents have suddenly started to be a little bit more relaxed about degrees of independence, spending more time with friends, perhaps being away from the family home a little bit more, maybe moving off to university. They're yet to be downtrodden by the sheer realities of life and the pressures of whatever that is, work, family life, I don't know, all the ills that the world has got to offer. And it just looks like an incredibly positive place to be. And then all of a sudden, whether it's some of the symptoms that we've just heard about, and obviously now you're all experts in brain tumours, which is great to know, whether it's some of those symptoms start to come along, and before long, they've been diagnosed with a brain tumour. And that potentially stops all of that, all of those hopes and dreams. Life has truly brought about the realities of grief, whether for them, for their parents, for their partner, potentially for their children. So I think it's a very nice quote that sums up a little bit of the starting point for this presentation. And Aristotle equally recognized the fact that young people are in a condition like permanent intoxication, because life is sweet and they are growing. Again, untroubled, as yet untroubled by some of those realities of life. So actually, some of the ideas about teenage and young adult healthcare or specialist care in no way, shape or form are new. People have recognized that this is a distinct group of people for a long, long period of time. But it's taken an awfully long period of time for that to kind of permeate down into healthcare settings, and certainly a long time to permeate into cancer healthcare. But this was equally backed up by things like the Platt Report in 1959. They equally recognised individual needs of young people and the fact that those needs were very, very different from either much younger children or much older adults. And like I say, in terms of it taking a long time to permeate into healthcare practice and policy, it wasn't until 2005 that probably were the biggest documents for our speciality, teenage and young adult cancer speciality, came along, and that was the NICE Improving Guidance. And that started to lay out some of the expectations and some of the things that healthcare should be delivering for this age group. So really not very long ago that actually documents started to arrive on the scene. And again, just carrying on the quote theme, and I think it might be in font 20. It was a very specialist kind of advice as to what we should be doing for our presentation, so hopefully those at the back can read it. So this was from a lady that had had both Hodgkin's disease at the age of 17, but also then had a breast cancer diagnosis at the age of 41. So the issues of identity were interesting, she says. I still identify myself primarily as a Hodgkin's survivor, rather than a breast cancer or patient/survivor, even though I am both. And that's because the Hodgkin's disease time was so formative at that stage of life and made so much of what I am now. The breast cancer at 41 hasn't been easy and had a big impact on my body and my way of life, but not on who I actually am. The stage of life made it much less disruptive. And actually, in terms of what makes young adults unique, certainly as a broad headline, that's probably as good a quote as is needed. It truly encapsulates an awful lot of what we are as a speciality, because actually cancer at this age group can have such a potentially devastating impact on young people that are going to live as long as we're all going to live, but actually the impact of that cancer, if we don't support them properly and well enough, it can devastate the rest of that life. Are they able to then meet friends, partners, get jobs, continue education, and cope with what they've actually had to put themselves through? So the period of 13 to 24-year-old, 13 to 24 years, is certainly a time of great turbulence. If there are people in the room that have perhaps got teenage children or young adults, within the sort of home circumstance, I'm sure this doesn't necessarily come as too much of a surprise. It's such a time of transition. And I genuinely believe, yes, when we're developing as babies, we're in the womb, all sorts of different things, we're massively learning. My 1-year-old and my 3-year-old are learning new things every day. But actually, in terms of what we are going to be for the rest of our lives, I don't think there's any greater period of time than that teenage and that young adult period of time. Not only physically, emotionally, psychologically, cognitively, but actually they're going to go through education at this time, potentially finish all of the education that is then going to set them up for the rest of their lives. So a cancer diagnosis, a life-threatening cancer diagnosis into that equation, alongside maybe relatively simple treatment options through to incredibly complex treatment options that maybe take several months or years. What impact does that have on all of those really, really core things that are going to determine who this young person is going to be for the next 30, 40, 50, 60 years? So from a social point of well, physically to begin with, there's massive hormone changes. So the brain is growing, the body is actually growing. So the impact of treatment, the impact of the cancer at that time can be potentially massive. Psychologically, they're learning about who they are emotionally. They're learning to interact with their peers socially. And actually peer support, peer interaction is a crucial time, is a crucial element of development for our young people. Cognitively, the most recent evidence suggests that our brains don't fully develop until we're potentially 25. So all of this is taking place in this period of time, as well as expecting to develop and attain GCSEs, A levels and degree. And actually it's quite interesting that across the world, we don't, not every country kind of views young adulthood in the same way we do through a healthcare point of view. So for us in the cancer world, it's generally regarded as sort of 13 to 24 or 25. But actually when I've been and met with colleagues in Holland, it's very much up to the age of 40. And I think that gives a slightly truer probably representation of what young adult is actually about, and their services over there are geared in a slightly different way to recognise that actually that young adulthood, that period of turbulence and settling down actually probably goes on much greater and much more beyond the age of 24 and 25. So we've had a little bit of a look at what makes this age group unique and why they're a distinct group of people. But actually, what's the impact of a brain tumour on a young adult? So I was slightly relieved again to see that some of the data I was going to use in the presentation perhaps tallied with what was used in the presentation before, which could have been slightly uncomfortable. So from brain and other CNS and intracranial tumours form the fourth most commonly diagnosed group of cancers in teenagers and young adults overall, accounting for about 14%. And that's split relatively evenly between malignant tumours and benign tumours, and those that are uncertain or unknown. And that's 14% of the total cancers in this age group. So in this age group, there's probably about 2,200, 2,300 that are diagnosed a year across the whole country. So one of the other elements that make this a unique group to be working with, actually, every single tumour in a young adult is basically a rare cancer. There are very few of our young people that get cancer. And then when you start to break it down into each of the different diagnoses, obviously that becomes even more rare. So we're talking probably about 330, 340 young people a year spread across the country. And like my colleague before alluded to, from a GP point of view, that means they might never see a young person in the whole of their career with cancer, and certainly not a brain tumour. The numbers of cases of brain tumours are split pretty much evenly across male and female. And this type of cancer comprises quite a wide range of tumours, including astrocytoma, pituitary adenoma, and craniopharyngioma. And again, it's important to bear that in mind when we're working with this group, because actually some of our young people, so for example, a 21, 22-year-old might come into your services or present with what is typically a paediatric tumour, and vice versa applies. So we have sort of 13, 14, 15-year-olds potentially presenting with what are adult-type brain tumours. And that becomes important because actually the treatment pathways might be very different for those, and they're ending up with specialists, so they're ending up in specialist care. So a 13, 14-year-old is ending up in paediatric care, when actually what they might truly need the specialist services of is an adult oncologist, an adult clinical oncologist, because actually that paediatric specialist very rarely sees that type of tumour, and vice versa. And one of the things that we'll look at with regards to good care is actually that teenage and young adult MDTs, so multidisciplinary team meetings, are a really key way to improving the actual care and the support that we deliver to our young people, because actually we're bringing those paediatric and adult clinicians together in one place. And luckily for us, we bring them together in the one place once a week, and it allows for good discussion about what is the best treatment. So with regards to surgery, chemo, radiotherapy, trial entry, trial option, actually making sure that our young people truly are accessing the very best care. I think the picture probably would resonate with most of the young people that we see. And actually, for such a long period of time for our brain tumour patients, and again, the previous presentation alluded to this, actually some of these brain tumours can sit there for an awfully long time. I guess most of you appreciate that from the people that you work with and the people that you see. But for such a long period of time, people might well have been going back to a GP for many months, many years, in fact, complaining of certain symptoms, just not feeling right, and actually genuinely not being believed. So there was a piece of work done with young people a couple of years ago, and they were asked, so we bring together young people every year, about 250 of them, to a conference, and it's a very good opportunity to just do some pretty basic sort of research, get a flavour for some of the experiences that they've had, just to get that number of people in one room. And one of the questions they were asked a couple of years ago was, how many times did you visit your GP with symptoms before you were referred to a specialist? And about a quarter said that they saw a GP once. 2 or 3 times was 27%, 4 or 5 times was 13%, and actually more than 5 times was over a third, about 34%. Now that's all cancers, but I would hedge a massive amount of money that the brain tumour patients in the room were very much falling into the 4, 5 or even more times of visiting a general practitioner before they were referred on into specialist services. And that then means that this thing has been there for an awfully long time. They can really lose an awful lot of trust in the healthcare services. We're quite reliant on GPs when we need them post-treatment, but actually a young person might not want to re-engage with that service, but actually they might have truly lost a whole host of trust in us, in the practitioners that are going to be delivering care, delivering treatments, for whom we're going to have a very close working relationship for a long period of time. And actually it can take quite a lot of time to repair some of that damage. But actually they've taken such a long period of time, and then all of a sudden they get a diagnosis, and then the brakes are off. They're on a journey that they can neither stop or very often control. And it's a very, very fast journey from that point on. There's surgery. It doesn't take long before surgery's been and done and dusted before they're coming and seeing the oncologist. It's not that long then, perhaps to getting on with radiotherapy or chemotherapy. And then it's that for an awfully long period of time sometimes. And then it's the whole recovering from that and just trying to take a breath and actually reflect on what they've actually been through. So I think the no breaks picture is probably a very fair reflection from what young people have said to me. That impact of a brain tumour on young people, like I've alluded to, and not always, but a lot of our treatments can be lengthy and definitely complex. They can use all modalities of treatment, so surgery is very often the first one, and then they will come and see us and perhaps move through into chemotherapy and concurrent radiotherapy, and actually chemotherapy may be going on for many months thereafter. The toxicities, any of you that have worked with patients that have had brain tumours that have undergone any of these things, the toxicities can be incredibly wide-ranging. You might have someone that has surgery only, tumour well and truly removed, who actually recovers incredibly well. They've either been lucky because of lucky in inverted commas, lucky about where the tumour was in the brain, the surgery was relatively straightforward and everything was able to be removed without leaving any kind of noticeable impact on either them or those around them. But actually that is not always the case. And some of the toxicities can leave people incredibly debilitated. I think that's some of the hardest bit for us, and one of the things I allude to in the presentation, certainly that's perhaps unique to this group, because actually, for me, brain tumours in young people is that group of diagnoses that the impact begins straight away very often. So the impact of surgery, it's there, it's very immediate, whether that's an impact on mobility, speech, cognitive function. And for quite a lot of our young people, that impact never goes away. So I'm in no way suggesting that the psychological impact of a leukemia perhaps, or some of the other types of cancers that we deal with, that is always going to live with that young person, but actually they generally recover from the physical side effects and seem to get an awful lot better. But actually some of those that are the most demanding on our service because of the needs that they've got are our brain tumour patients. And actually when we're doing work with kinds of ongoing life issues, they sit there and they just go, I'm never going to be able to be a part of that, whether that's because of the cognitive damage that's been done, that ability to look after themselves, think for themselves. It can be incredibly sad and incredibly hard work, both for them, but also those loved ones around them as well. And that very much touches on the long-term implications of treatment. I don't think there's any way of underestimating what those long-term implications might be. And actually, I'd like to think that if there are like-minded people in the room, experienced healthcare professionals, those that are delivering good care day in, day out, that actually some of the things that we sometimes just don't think about, the scans, those follow-up scans. I'm going to allude to a young lady that I've been working with recently, and actually, it's massive, just the build-up to coming in for that scan. Has that tumour shown any signs of recurrence on that scan? Kind of stops her life for a period of time leading up to the scan, and then the come down afterwards in terms of the emotion, the relief, is just huge. And that impact is massive. So I think this starts to really touch on, again, that uniqueness of this age group. So we've talked about the fact that this is an incredibly vulnerable life stage. If we do damage at this life stage that we either don't support or we don't repair or we don't give a young person the skills to cope with, then we can be doing damage that never repairs itself and stops that young person living. And we're going to cure an awful lot of our young people of their brain tumours, but actually, are we allowing them to live for the next 30, 40, 50 years? Or actually, because of the damage we did when we treated, are we going to make them dependent on others for the rest of that life? The period of time when that brain tumour occurs, that young person is developing independence, they've perhaps gone to university, they're perhaps looking at getting their first job, or if they're truly blessed, looking at buying like first home, that sort of thing, may settling away from the family home. The impact of treatment, what does that do on that? It generally brings a young person back into the family fold. It makes them dependent on others when they've waited, 18 years to escape. They're then dragged forcibly back into that because they need the support of those around them, because they either feel too ill to look after themselves, they've lost maybe some sort of financial income of their own. They're developing their own identity at this age group. So actually, what does 6 weeks of radiotherapy do to that? Are we changing that identity? Are we stopping them from being able to develop that identity? Are we curtailing their social activity because they feel too unwell? Are we taking them out of school? And again, that impact on educational achievement, vocational opportunities. That age group, we're massive advocates in our service of trying to get young people to stay in education if at all possible. But it's just not always feasible. They're too tired, they're too sick. Maybe the surgery has done too much damage to allow that to continue. Are universities or schools or colleges capable of being flexible enough? They should be, but are they able to be flexible enough to allow that young person to attend perhaps when they feel well enough, but not all the time? Our experience is very mixed when it comes to that sort of thing. And we've touched upon the fact that their cognitive ability hasn't perhaps truly developed itself. It's not fully developed. So are they then able to make executive decisions and massively life-changing decisions with regards to their treatment and what they want when it comes to their cancer treatment? They're developing sexuality and intimacy. So from a body image point of view, and from a fertility point of view, what do our treatments do with regards to that, and how do we support our young people to kind of cope with that impact? Majorly disfiguring surgery, how does a young person cope with that when they're then walking back into university, or they're looking to meet a girlfriend or a boyfriend, a life partner? Or what impact does it have on the fact that they already felt they'd got that life partner? Is that person able to then cope with the new young person they see before them? And actually, there's an intensity of relationships at this age that's a very natural part of young person's development. And actually, that can then encroach on us as professionals. So have we got strong professional boundaries in place? Young people are looking to have people they can associate with. So when that young person says, it'd be great to be able to stay in touch when I'm away from here, you're the only person that truly understands what I'm going through. And they say, just give me that mobile number or your email address. And before you know it, you've been sucked into a world where they're emailing constantly. So actually, we need to be very strong as professionals sometimes, and aware that actually young people are craving that intensity of relationship. But from a professional point of view, us and our colleagues need to be very clear about where those boundaries lie. And I think a lot of our young people would report the fact that they don't feel a huge amount of control sometimes about what's going on. It's appointments here, you need to be here for 6 weeks. They've got not necessarily any control over how the drugs and the treatments are going to make them feel. And actually one of the things that we do as a service is hopefully try and give that back to our young people. So again, those impacts, that brain tumour, young adults, sometimes are unexpected and rare consequences of treatment. And again, that might be because of the fact that their age and the type of tumour that they've got. The hopes and dreams, the fears and the losses are just massive. The treatment itself, the fact that it might take a young person out of their normal social setting, the challenges to their self-esteem, that loss of control, the increased dependence on others, isolation from peers. If they're with us in the hospital for 6 weeks at a time, and their friends' lives are just continuing, or they've had to drop out of university for a year, those peers, they're carrying on with all of their lives, and sometimes that kind of contact with peers falls off gradually. Sometimes it's very dramatic. The impact on fertility, have we had that discussion? Have we tried to enable a young person to maintain as much fertility or bank their sperm or harvest their eggs if at all possible? The challenges on family dynamics, I've said that young people are craving that independence, but actually parents might equally be craving some of that young person's independence and might quite welcome the fact they've gained a little bit of space back into their own home, and they've seen their fledgling kind of leave and set off to create their own lives. And actually, what does that do to them when that young person comes back? And it can have a huge impact on family dynamics. And certainly cancer and a brain tumour has got that potential to overwhelm the coping skills of a teenager and a young adult. So I think these might well just about convey themselves to the back of the room, so apologies if they don't. But these are just some of those quotes from young people that sum up some of those things. So things like your hair might fall out, you worry about how your family will cope, you worry about how your friends will treat you, the missing of school and exams, so on and so forth. And just sometimes we think it's going to be about what the treatment is and the sickness or the diarrhea, but actually it might be about the fact that the most worrying aspect is the impact on girlfriend or boyfriend and what they're going to think about them as a young person, missing out on nights out and trips with friends, that kind of thing. However, it's not all as gloomy as the picture I've just painted for the first 20 minutes or so. There are some exceptional services out there, and I'd like to think that myself and my team, some of the colleagues that we have around the country, such as the teams in Sheffield, are doing some amazing work with young people with cancer. And actually, we're blessed, we're truly blessed. When you say the words cancer in young people, other people are incredibly generous either with time or their money. And that maybe sounds a little bit basic and perhaps even a touch callous, but actually what it then enables us to do is we work with charity partners to deliver amazing services. So we fund staff that the NHS would never fund. We fund opportunities that, again, the NHS would never fund. So I'm going to highlight a lot of this just by showing a variety of different pictures and just kind of picking up on those as we go through. So the very kind introduction alluded to the fact that there was a service that was piloted across the Northwest. And for those of you that work in T-Way cancer or know anything about it will know that there are principal treatment centres, and there's probably, I think there's about 15 of those across the country, and they're big centres, big oncology centres that a lot of young people will come to, and generally they've got teenage and young adult units associated with them. There's lots of skills and expertise, and the services there are very good. But actually, a lot of young people, and potentially the majority of young people, don't go anywhere near one of those centres. They have their cancer treatments elsewhere. And what the pilot in the Northwest did was it recognised that, and it funded 2 specialist nurses on the left and 1 youth worker on the right to work across the Greater Manchester, Lancashire, Cumbria, Cheshire area and actually go and meet young people where they were having or where they were choosing to have their treatment. And we were very, very lucky that the inaugural Prince of Wales Integrated Care Award, we were lucky to win the first year of that a couple of years ago, and recognise the fact that actually that was quite an innovative way of certainly running TYA services. I'm sure across other services it's not, but certainly for us it was. And it meant that young people that would not have accessed direct face-to-face support prior to this were then doing so. And this was about our professionals working with professionals on the ground, the site specialist professionals working together to make sure that young person and their family truly had an all-rounded, well-grounded experience. And I think one of the things that makes good care and support is that professional team. So there's specialist nurses, there's youth workers, there are social workers. We're blessed where we are to have an occupational therapist and a physio for our young people. We've got 3 social workers, about 4 specialist nurses, the OT, the physio, a couple of youth workers. And it's not a bragging exercise, but when you think that through our service in the Northwest, there was probably about 200 new young people last year through our MDT, that's incredibly resource intensive. And I don't think that that's overly resourced. It's appropriate for the number of young people that we work with and highlights that uniqueness of this age group. But again, the vast majority of those roles have come from charitable funding, or it certainly have been initiated with charitable funding. Take away the charity funding, those donations from public running marathons and doing all sorts of crazy stuff. Take that away, we're probably left with a couple of specialist nurses and not very much else. And the support that we offer looks very, very different. So we're truly blessed. Other services have got psychologists, educationalists. It's a very positive service to be a part of because actually you genuinely feel like you can make a difference. So other areas that make good care and support, what does it look like? It's about peer support, so it's running peer support activities. It's recognising that socialisation for young people is huge. Take them away from their normal social circumstances, school, college, uni, their friends. If we take them away from that or we give them treatments where they feel they can't interact with that, how do they get that socialisation experience of just being with other young people? So we can try and help and replicate some of that and create groups that they can be a part of. And create social activities that they can be a part of. So whether that's doing stuff on the ward, whether that's kind of baking groups or art or music groups, getting them to play in a band, whether it's running a monthly lunch or a monthly kind of meal out in the evening across the region. There are lots of different things that we can do. We run a body image group we run a body image group, we run a Look Good, Feel Better group for our young people. That actually, don't want to kind of say negative stuff about some of that, but we always have to bear in mind if we're going to run peer support activities, we're going to create friendships where there wouldn't necessarily have been friendships before. We have to recognise that some of our young people are not going to survive their treatment. So actually, what impact does it have on those other young people that are left if actually some of our young people do actually pass away? So we've very recently run a piece of work where young people have come and they've told us that. We've run our own kind of celebration day that they've organised. We've got space on our Facebook page for them to kind of interact with us as professionals. So we do always have to just be a little bit wary. The pool table on the right is meant to signify the fact that there are teenage and young adult environments. We want an environment where a 21-year-old feels comfortable. We need them to feel comfortable if they've got to come to us on a very regular basis or stay for a long period of time. But not only them, their friends and their family have to be comfortable. So we can't be running something with strict visiting hours, so open visiting is one of the things. There are nice spaces for them to take themselves away from their rooms and kind of sit down with friends, big spaces. We provide activities for them to do while they're there, but actually things that just make that life in hospital just that little bit better and as unrestrictive as possible. We're blessed to run a yearly conference, which I alluded to before. So Find Your Sense of Tumour is a conference that's been running for many years now. And we do generally bring about 200 or so young people together. It's quite a momentous event. Anyone in the room that's had an opportunity to go, it's a very powerful place to be. And it treats young people with the respect that they deserve. If you guys went to a conference, you'd want good quality speakers, hopefully included. You'd want good quality speakers, you want a good environment, you want a positive place to be. You'd want to hear from colleagues like yourselves. You'd want to hear from experts within the field. That's what we deliver for our young people. And then also create some very large parties overnight. But in that daytime, it's about learning from each other. It's about listening to each other. So young people like themselves talking about their own experiences, but actually healthcare professionals talking about developments, It's about getting politicians down there sometimes, letting them be questioned by young people that are living this kind of experience. So national events for our young people. We're blessed to associate ourselves with other charities. So the Ellen MacArthur Cancer Trust are just phenomenal. Anyone that needs to do any volunteering, doesn't mind being on the water, this is the place for you. They're absolutely superb. So there are several holidays throughout the year, and young people with confidence issues on the back of their cancer diagnosis or on the back of their treatment are invited to go along. They sail the boat. They can just sit on the boat like these young people and just enjoy the sunshine or the rain. And they either sail off Scotland or off the Isle of Wight, and massively life-changing experiences. Young people doing stuff that they never thought they were able to or going to be capable of doing again. Good care and support has to look like support post-treatment. It's got to. So the picture on the left, another charity called Climbing Out run adventure weeks up in the Lake District, and young people post-treatment that struggle perhaps walking down to the end of the street are encouraged to get up mountains, abseil, rock climb, canoe, swim in Windermere, actually taking themselves out of that comfort zone. But actually alongside that we run different projects such as and programs such as the Way Forward program. So this is a 2-day event where young people are invited to come. It's a residential event. We talk about different aspects of life and living life post-treatment, so insurance, work, education. Do they put their cancer experience on a job application form? Do they not? They're encouraged or allowed to talk very openly about the worries regarding things like relapse and how that experiences and how that cancer experience has been for them. So this is about looking forward. This is about re-engaging with life and enabling them to have some of the skills to live that life. Good care and support has to be about influencing the people that make decisions. So we've had a very proactive group in Manchester for a long period of time, and some of the pieces of work that they've done and the projects they've worked on in the past have got onto the radar of politicians. So Tony Blair came and met with our young people many years ago. But it's about influencing those people that can make a decision. It's about making sure that teenage and young adult cancer care is on the radar of those people that need to know about it. But actually, picking up on a point from the previous presentation, I think it's also about influencing those within healthcare, because actually there are some huge, huge gaps in my speciality, and trials and research is absolutely one of them. The number of young people that get onto clinical trials is far, far, far too few. So I think across us as a region, 75% don't have any kind of access. There is no clinical trial for 75% of my young people, and that just isn't good enough. And there are certainly particular types of cancer, and looking at some of the survival data that you saw on here, brain tumours could fall into that category. Is actually, are they missing out on trials that are available? So as a 21-year-old denied the opportunity to get onto a trial because actually the cut-off age is 18 or 19, whereas actually their diagnosis absolutely fits in with that clinical trial. So are there young people missing because of their age, and vice versa? Absolutely. 16, 17-year-olds missing out on adult-based clinical trials. That sort of thing just should not be allowed to be taking place, and there's a lot of work being done to try and rectify some of that. But actually it's also about actually generating the trials. So is there the passion and the drive to do that in what is a very, very small field? And that's why quite a lot of the trials that take place for our specialty are probably at least European-based, but are often very worldwide-based as well. Good care and support is about raising awareness. So the gentleman on the left is in a school pretending that he's got 2 testicles in each hand, or 1 testicle in each hand, and is talking to young people in assemblies, raising awareness. And sometimes its cancer campaign goes very much alongside that. This isn't about scaring young people. It's just about letting them know that that ache or pain that hasn't gone away, that they've seen a GP about a few times, actually there's a potential, and a very small one, but that could be a cancer diagnosis. We want them to go back to that GP and perhaps be a little bit more forceful about the fact they want something doing in terms of looking into it. So actually they can be left reassured there's nothing wrong, or actually we try and pick people up a little bit earlier diagnosis. So there's lots of work doing, and actually There is a very recent education package that's on the Royal College of GP website, little online education module trying to raise awareness in, well, anyone, but certainly in particular in GPs, that actually that 21-year-old sat in front of them with those headaches, actually it might be something more than exam stress, it might be something more than a migraine related to boyfriend or girlfriend trouble. Actually, it might just be a cancer diagnosis. And the sooner they're seen, the better, generally. Good care and support absolutely looks like policies. It's about raising professional awareness, raising professional standards. So there's a competency book on the left done collaboratively between the Teenage Cancer Trust and the Royal College of Nursing that lays out competencies for nurses that want to work in this speciality. And then colleagues, there's now a second edition, and I hadn't noticed before, but one of my colleagues is obviously on the front of both of these, but she's been relegated now and has been replaced on the second edition, which I'm sure she won't be too pleased about. But so there is a blueprint of care. So those of you that perhaps don't work in TYA cancer all the time, but see it occasionally, or you know of colleagues that see it occasionally, it can be quite a scary prospect having young people sat before you. You kind of think, well, what should we be doing in this circumstance? So the blueprint of care was designed absolutely with that in mind. It's about professionals that have worked in the field for a long period of time, putting their thoughts, their ideas, all backed or referenced, but actually into a very good book, a good guide that actually anyone can pick up and use. And anyone that's interested, feel free to drop me a line, and people are very welcome to get hold of a copy of that. It's absolutely about events like this. So in the past, someone like myself would not have been stood on this stage talking to professionals like you at a conference like this. So it's absolutely about getting that message out. And it's about charities such as the Brain Tumour Charity embracing the fact that TYAs, young adults, adolescents are that bit different. So actually there is a group of young people that are young ambassadors for the Brain Tumour Charity that are out there spreading that message, young people talking to other young people, talking to other healthcare professionals about their experiences and what things need to change, but also being a point of reference for young people perhaps just coming into a diagnosis. So people they can contact and actually get support from for themselves. It's about study days like this, like I say, it's about people like myself standing on this stage and actually talking to people that might never have thought about it or considered these issues before, or actually you guys going back into your practice and talking to your colleagues. And just coming on to the barriers bit, and obviously maybe this is the wrong way to finish a presentation talking about barriers at the end, but hopefully there's been a good chunk of positivity in the middle. I think one of the things that some professionals might come back and say is, actually, these services aren't going to be across the country. How would we access them? But actually, as unclear as the map is to all of you in the room, what it is meant to highlight is the fact that there are teenage and young adult services and units absolutely across the whole of the country. So wherever you are diagnosed in this country, there is going to be a service for you. And there is a greater amount of local services being worked on and developed, but actually there are centres that everyone should be able to access. And if people feel differently, then very happy to hear about that. In my experience, brain tumours has probably been one of the most frustrating areas for someone like myself to kind of have to work with, and some of the professionals that work within the field, whether that's the surgery element, have not always been as engaging with a service like ours as maybe we would like. I think sometimes the C word, the cancer word, isn't used, and perhaps appropriately so. Something that's very low grade or something that's been removed through surgery, sometimes we've certainly come up with the fact, well, I don't want to involve your team in that because you're going to create a lot of worry and distress in someone that's just going to crack on with the rest of their life and they're never going to think about this ever again. And I would argue that, yes, I can take some of that on board. They might never need any other element of treatment, but the fact that you've told them there's a tumour, a lump, whatever word you've decided to use to describe it, they're probably going to reflect on that at some point. And actually, if there's a service that they can access, that they can come back to and ask some questions of at a later point in time, I genuinely think that's a better place to be. We're not going to walk in and suddenly say, yes, you've got cancer and you're about to die, when that neurosurgeon said, no, you're not. But we're going to say, actually, there's a team of professionals that if you need a little bit of extra help or support, we're here to give that to you. Sometimes professionals haven't worked as closely and as well together as they should do. It can be a stressful place to be, and anyone that works in the charity sector and has to interact with the NHS will know sometimes that's not always the smoothest of places to sit. The ignoring of guidance, the ignoring of the fact that all young people should be talked about in a TYA MDT if they've got a cancer diagnosis, people just ignore it and just think, well, we're not going to do it. Why do we need to bother with that? And actually, young people need to be discussed in that environment, so the ignoring of guidance. And actually, the fact that sometimes our services are not where they should be as yet. And certainly that kind of post-treatment, yes, I've alluded to some good pieces of work, but we know there are elements of our service that are far from being where they need to be. And certainly post-treatment support is probably one of those. And we need to certainly be working on that, which we are. So it's a massive thanks. Thank you all for not going downstairs and for staying in the room. The Teenage Cancer Trust, they fund my role, and the Christie part fund my role. So it's absolute thanks to them and their support, and obviously the Brain Tumour Charity for inviting me to come. I don't know what the slides do and whether you guys all get copies of those, but people are very welcome to be in touch if you're interested in more info or any of the documents we've talked about. And thank you very much, and any questions, very welcome.
Thank you very much, David. Thank you.